It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Perez coming to you from Baltimore. The Arctic region is one of the most vulnerable on the planet when it comes to climate change. It is heating up twice as fast as the rest of the globe. Indigenous communities are having to relocate due to changes in the environment with melting permafrost and sea level rise. Barack Obama's ban of oil drilling in most of the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans at the end of his term was seen as a last-ditch effort to lock in environmental protections before Donald Trump took over. In April, however, President Trump reversed that ban with these words.
Our country is blessed with incredible natural resources, including abundant offshore oil and natural gas reserves. But the federal government has kept 94% of these offshore areas closed for exploration and production. And when they say closed, they mean closed. This deprives our country of potentially thousands and thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in wealth. I pledged to take action, and today I am keeping that promise. This executive order starts the process of opening offshore areas to job-creating energy exploration. It reverses the previous administration's Arctic leasing ban.
With us to discuss these issues facing the Arctic is Subhankar Banerjee. He is the Lannan Foundation Endowed Chair and Professor of Art and Ecology at the University of New Mexico. He is an artist, scholar, and activist. Subhankar's exhibition, Long Environmentalism in the Near North, on Arctic conservation and indigenous rights, will open at the University of New Mexico Art Museum on June 6th. Subhankar, good to have you back.
Very good to be talking with you, Sharmini, again.
So, Subhankar, let's park what Donald Trump just said. If you could, give us a brief historical background on the political campaigns to protect both the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the Beaufort and Chukchi Sea of Arctic Alaska.
So first of all, you spoke about that the Arctic is warming at a rate of at least twice the global average. That is true. Arctic is what we call the bellwether of climate change. But there is more to that. The Arctic is also what the National US Academy of Sciences has said is the integrator of Earth's climate systems, both atmospheric and oceanic. So if we further disintegrate the Arctic through more warming, it affects not just the Arctic, but the whole Earth. So this is very serious matter. It's very dangerous. That said, specific to President Trump's comment on undoing President Obama's Arctic offshore drilling ban, here is what happened. President George Bush actually opened up what we now call the second wave of Arctic offshore exploration in 2003. No development started, because we filed several lawsuits. That process went on. Some seismic exploration did happen during the Bush era, but after President Obama came to office, he became a pretty strong supporter of Arctic offshore drilling throughout his presidency. And we fought against that through various legal means, and we won twice in court. But then right before leaving office, literally a month before leaving office, he used an obscure provision in the 1953, what is called the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, to set aside 115 million acres of the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas permanently protected. And that particular law was actually used by President George H.W. Bush in 1991 to protect the Monterey Bay following the 1968 oil spill there. And no president has undone a previous president's invocation of the Oaks Law. But that's what President Trump is trying to do. He hasn't banned this. I want to clarify that he's trying to. On April 28th, he made the announcement. But soon thereafter, on May 3rd, a coalition of environmental groups have filed a lawsuit against Trump's move. So that lawsuit will move forward, and we are going to fight it out in the legal side. So that's the Arctic Ocean thing that the Trump has not won. We are going to fight it out in court. The second one is the Arctic Refuge campaign, which truly is a biological, national, and international treasure and ought to be designated as a World Heritage Site from the United Nations, but instead the US government wants to turn it into an oil field, specifically the Obama administration, the Trump administration. So last week, President Trump sent his budget proposal to Congress, in which sneakily, not surprising, but sneakily included the language to open up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So what will happen now that Congress will take up, this is unlike the Arctic Ocean fight, which is in a court battle, this will be more of a legislative fight, state to state, on the ground, all across the country. And what President Trump, the language he's using, it'll create thousands of jobs, it'll give us energy security, are language pulled directly from the oil company lobbying that we already experienced all through 8 years of the Bush administration. It's nothing new. These are basically hyperboles and lies. And so that campaign will begin now to protect the Arctic Refuge. We defeated each and every one of President Bush's proposal to open up the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge during his 8 years of presidency. And we will, now the fight begins again. So it's a deja vu. Over the last 30 years, there have been 50 attempts to open up the Arctic Refuge to drilling, but we have prevailed because the American public have wanted it to protect. And right now, there is a poll that came out from the Center for American Progress that found that more than 2/3 of American public are opposed to drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and more than 50% are strongly opposed. And I can a bit later talk about why this place is so significant, both biologically speaking and indigenous human rights issue.
And we'll get there, but since we are following political leaders and what they have done in terms of the Arctic or the damage they've done, what happened during the Obama era and the Arctic seas? Now, he's coming out as the good fellow in the sense that he did try to protect drilling in the Arctic towards the very end of his presidency, whereas he could have actually done a lot more in the 8 years that he was president to stop some of this, but he didn't. Give us a sense of your take on the Obama era.
So, you know, after President Obama came in, he basically pursued and strongly supported President Bush's Arctic offshore policy. So after the Deepwater Horizon spill, BP's Deepwater Horizon spill in Gulf of Mexico in April 2010, I wrote an article called BP in the Arctic with a question mark for Tom Dispatch of the Nation Institute, which was very widely distributed. Subsequent to that, President Obama's administration kept fast-tracking various permits for Shell. And as you remember, I kept writing for Tom Dispatch, for Climate Storytellers, which I founded, kept giving interviews to the Real News Network and to Democracy Now! Multiple times during the Obama years. And so President Obama did actually support drilling in the Arctic seas all through his presidency. But in 2015, after we won a court battle in 2014 in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, in 2015, he went ahead and gave all the permits to Shell to go drill. So Shell went up there in September 2015, and after a disappointing exploratory drilling season, they abandoned their Arctic offshore program. Then following year in 2016, like I said, a month before leaving, he used this OXLA to ban drilling 150 million acres. Now, we are grateful for that, but it's more protecting his legacy than what he did for the Arctic. That said, I have to say, though, that President Obama did not pursue drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, primarily because the strong Democratic base would have opposed it anyway. But what we had hoped from him was that he would use an executive order before leaving office, which was tried with President Clinton also, did not succeed. There was a lot of campaign with President Obama to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge as a national monument, but President Obama did not do that. He did it for the Bear Ears National Monument, which also President Trump is now trying to undo. So President Obama's Arctic policy, he was basically a pro-drilling advocate overall, that I would say. And we fought it.
All right, Subhankar, let's move on to Trump. Now, he's trying to open up both the Arctic and the National Wildlife Refuge. And as you stated in his budget, he makes some of this possible as well. So give us a sense of the damage that is about to be caused on the Arctic as a result of what Trump is trying to do, as he said in that clip we played at the top of the show.
It's extremely reckless to really expand drilling in the Arctic because, as I said, the Arctic is the integrator of world's, actually whole planet's climate systems. The farther we dig up more and more oil from the Arctic and then burn it, we actually destabilize the Arctic more and more. So it's extremely reckless, it's extremely dangerous. We have to fight it on the ground, all across the country and around the nation. Come together to fight this. So what Trump is doing is not surprising. This is what he promised during his campaign, and he's kind of, in a way, following through his campaign, including he may potentially pull out of the Paris Accord. None of this is surprising. So we have to fight it. And the Arctic is both the ocean and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge are incredible biological treasures. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is the most biologically diverse conservation area in the entire Arctic, and the Arctic Seas of Alaska hosts one of the most biologically diverse and complex marine ecosystems, Arctic marine ecosystems on the entire circumpolar Arctic. So these are biologically really national and international treasures. And indigenous communities, the Gwich'in Nation, 15 villages across Alaska and across the Yukon and Northwest Territories in Canada, depend on the Porcupine River caribou herd for that actually give birth in the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge, where exactly Trump wants to drill for oil. And they depend on these caribou, and they have done this for many, many millennia, is for their nutritional needs, their cultural identity, their spiritual identities. So this is a human rights issue for the Gwich'in Nation. So they're fighting from a human rights point of view. Right now, as you and I are speaking, right now, about 200,000 a strong Porcupine River caribou herd are in the coastal plain where drilling is proposed. And within the next 10 days, about 40,000 calves will be born where drilling is proposed. And right now, as I'm speaking, 3 members of the Gwich'in Nation, 2 from Alaska, 1 from Canada, are traveling through the Southwest where I live on a 9-event tour through 4 states, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and Colorado. The tour started on May 18th in Tucson, Arizona, where I attended, and will end on June 1st in Boulder, Colorado, asking people to support their human rights campaign. So this is both an ecological campaign, it is both a climate campaign, and it is a human rights campaign that we have to defeat Trump's proposals.
Right. And you mentioned the Paris Climate Accord. And this looks like it's going to be the biggest environmental disaster of Trump's tenure in Washington, particularly because he's up against some of the more liberal leaders of Europe, and even India and China are looking more concerned about the environment than the United States, or should be taking up a lead in terms of these issues. What do you think of the withdrawal from the climate accord, what Trump is trying to do, and the implications of it?
Well, as one of your previous guests pointed out, it's more symbolic because the Paris Climate Accord it's symbolic. It's a good thing that all 195 nations have signed it, and there is an intention, but it's all an intention. Each of those contributions, each country decided what to do. So it's not really legally binding to begin with. And what Trump is doing is not a surprise again, because he is trying to turn the United States into an all-out fossil fuel capitalist state, all-out fossil fuel. And he's doing it under no guise. Like Obama was trying to do some of these things with nice rhetoric. He just wants to do it all out. He wants to sell the country to big oil and big coal, and we have to fight that. That said, if you look at right now the US Energy Information Administration website, what you will find is that when President Obama took office, US combined production of oil and gas was almost at par with Russia, a little bit less. By 2012, US had already exceeded Russia and Saudi Arabia in combined oil and gas production. And as of 2015, far exceeded Russia and Saudi Arabia in combined oil and gas production. So US is already the largest producer of fossil fuels on earth. What Trump is trying to do on top of that is to really revive the coal industry on top of all of the few areas of oil that Obama may or may not have tried to protect. He's trying to open it all up. So it's an all-out fossil fuels capitalism that's going on under the Trump, including probably what he wants to do is rapid expansion of coal in the Appalachia, which is extremely environmentally destructive, as you know, mountaintop removal all through the Appalachian Mountain, and you can only see the destruction from the air. And I've been working in the Arctic, that few American of the public know that Arctic holds the largest coal deposit of North America. There is an estimated 4,000 tons of bituminous coal in the Western Arctic of Alaska. Not all of it is technically or economically recoverable, but that would supply, in theory, 4,000 years of coal for US consumption at the current rate. So it's very, very dangerous if Trump tries to revive the coal industry. But that said, the oil and the coal lobby runs US government, and Trump is their chosen man in a way. So we have to fight on the ground all across the country and come together. This is all the Paris Climate Accord and all that on a top-down approach sounds good on paper, but the real fight has to happen on the ground. So this is really something we have to mobilize all across, because this is the future of life on Earth.
All right. With that heavy words, I thank you so much for joining us today, Subhankar.
Thank you, Sharmini, for having me.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.